We've had effectively 3 votes on leaving the European Union. We had the general election where David Cameron promised a referendum. We had the referendum itself, and then the general election last year where both the Labour Party and the Conservative Party committed to implementing the result of the referendum. I think voting until you get the result the establishment want is not particularly democratic. People like me, who have long favoured leaving the European Union, think that being outside it is a great advantage, will be economically better for us, and so on, and that the only people who think leaving is this great disruption economically are people who always backed Remain. And it is difficult that you've got people in charge who backed Remain. I think what the Prime Minister set out in her Mansion House speech is a compromise that both Remainers and Leavers accepted at the time, gets us out of the European Union comprehensively. There are some bits of it that I wouldn't have chosen, but they're not unreasonable. And so I think it's possible, but I don't think Chequers does it. So it's a policy that needs to be changed.
And the aim of your Eurosceptic group, the European Research Group, is very much change the policy, not the leader. If Theresa May won't change the policy, then what do you do? Well,
then it comes to votes in Parliament, and the question is, will the Prime Minister have a majority in Parliament for the Chequers deal? And it looks as if she doesn't. That yesterday Peter Mandelson came out to say that it was a very bad deal as proposed under Chequers, and that indicates that the pro-European wing of the Labour Party doesn't like it. Normally the opposition votes against things because that's what oppositions do. If there isn't sufficient support within the Conservative Party, this deal will not get through the House of Commons.
And then what happens?
And then we have to have another deal, or we leave on WTO terms. And leaving on WTO terms means we trade with the European Union in the way we trade with the rest of the world, which is nearly 60% of our trade, and that we don't have to pay them £39 billion. So there's nothing to be fearful about.
Only way that we can therefore find a clear direction forward on Brexit is to go back to the British people and put the decision back in their hands.
When you say put the decision back in their hands, you don't mean another Remain, Leave binary decision. What would you be offering on that ballot paper in an ideal world?
I'm saying it needs to offer the 3 choices that in practice we have. Either a soft Brexit, which is what the Prime Minister's offering. I think in practice that's the worst of all worlds. I think whether you're a Remain voter that thinks, well, hang on, if we're having all the rules, we might as well be sat around the table influencing them, or whether you're one of the many Leave voters who's certainly been in touch with me saying, this isn't what we voted for. It's not the clean break from a European Union. I think that, nevertheless, needs to be on the ballot paper. I think a clean break does need to be on the ballot paper too, a no-deal scenario, in other words. And I think, of course, staying in the EU is the third route forward.
Why do you feel that the Remain option should be on? I mean, a soft Brexit stroke, a no-deal Brexit is one thing that possibly could be considered, but we've already voted for Leave. Why would we need to have Remain back on that ballot paper?
Because I think in practice it's one of the 3 principal options.
Well, it's not. We've already voted to leave and we've already triggered our... I mean, look, listen, MPs, you talk about an impasse in Parliament, MPs voted to have a... there was a manifesto commitment from David Cameron that there would be a referendum. He won that election. Then MPs voted for there to be an EU referendum. Then MPs voted to trigger Article 50. MPs have voted for the EU withdrawal bill. Why do you think Remain is still on the menu?
Because, again, I think if you talk to Leave voters, a lot of them will say, look, you know, we're either in or we're out. We want to be out, but if we can't have a proper clean break, then we're better off being around the table influencing the rules instead of having to accept them.
I've not met a single Leave voter who said that. Not one.
Well,
not one.
I think that we have to structure a referendum so that people really can choose between the clear routes forward. But I think what is clear to me is that, regrettably, Parliament will not be able to take that decisive decision that Britain needs.
Does this undermine the result of the EU referendum?
No, I don't think it does at all. And I think what you've seen here is, again, an effort by the establishment, given that many of the electoral commissioners are on public record as having stated opinions hostile to Brexit in one way or the other. You're seeing a situation where they're going after one, and this is after £9 million of public money was spent on a leaflet. The whole of the establishment was thrown against the Leave campaign. They're going after one side, and they're not looking in detail at the very significant number of occasions where the Remain campaign coordinated different parts of the Remain effort, and this has been documented on social media for a number of years.
Does it undermine the EU referendum results?
Well, you can't rerun a referendum that's already happened. So I, as you know, Julia, because we talk about these things a lot, I don't myself get stuck in the past. What matters is the future. The reason why what happened 2 years ago is so important is that we're clearly heading towards the people's vote on the Brexit treaty, because it's clear, as last night showed in the House of Commons, that there is no majority now for any Brexit policy. That being the case, the people will need to decide what happens when Theresa May negotiates her Brexit deal, which I think is going to seriously undermine our economy and people's jobs and livelihoods. So what's crucial when we come to that people's vote, which I think will happen next year, is that the people who broke the law last time and were a party to telling lies to the British people, to manipulating spending limits, perhaps even, in some cases, to being conduits for money coming from Russia into the Vote Leave campaign to get us out of the EU, because the two people who want us out of the EU most are President Putin and President Trump.
No, I think I want it more than them, to be fair.
If we do go to that people's vote, it's very important that the people who broke the law last time and told the lies and were the conduits to all of this foreign money.
Those 4 amendments were deliberately tabled to weaken the Chequers agreement, which the Prime Minister reached with her cabinet, summarised in the White Paper. Now, why Theresa May decided to accept them, I'm at a loss to understand. She chose to go along with them, which weakens her negotiating hand with Brussels, makes it even more difficult to deliver agreement with Brussels about what's in the White Paper. And I don't begin to understand why she chose to do that. We've got a clear policy in the Labour Party in favour of a customs union. We will be voting in the trade bill debate later today in favour of a customs union. Some Conservatives, I think, will be voting in favour of that as well. I don't know what the result will be, but I'm very puzzled about why the Prime Minister did what she did yesterday.
What is the concern on the backbenchers, particularly among Brexiteers, in terms of the risks of basically, ousting Theresa May, undermining her, and then possibly leading to a long, bitter leadership battle, or possibly even a general election, possibly losing to Jeremy Corbyn, but also the threat of keeping her, not delivering Brexit, and effectively thereby handing the keys to number 10 to Jeremy Corbyn?
I mean, let's look at Labour. They're at the weakest. I know Stephen said about, they've got a firm policy on Brexit, but it does change every week. So, but looking at our own government, I've said, for the last few weeks that we do need a new Prime Minister. I do stick to that. I'd like to see a Brexiteer in place, somebody who really believes in the cause and will, that bang that drum to and provide a positive vision, really, which I feel is unfortunately lacking at the moment.
I'm just wondering if we could get your little one in charge, because it sounds to me like she'd be talking more sense than the government is right now.
Well, he was born on the day we voted Article 50, so that's quite sweet.
That's quite prescient.
It is very sad on the backbench. It's very frustrating. I've always been, loyal Conservative. I've never voted against the government, but there's an increasing number of us who's getting frustrated, and we feel that we're not delivering Brexit.
I think the interesting thing about what she said isn't. We can all have our views as to what goes on in someone's soul. And so, I've noticed on social media a lot of people saying, how can you possibly say that a lifelong anti-racist could be anti-Semitic and so on? That's not the point. The point isn't what he thinks. The point is what he does. If somebody walks around the street kicking people with ginger hair and then says, I love people with ginger hair, I really do, all I'm doing is showing them affection, then nobody would be in any doubt that that person had an issue with people with ginger hair. And the point is that the Labour Party has adopted a definition of anti-Semitism that specifically allows people to use remarks about Jews that anyone who adopts the formally recognised definition that other people have adopted would be banned. So, for instance, you could say, under the Labour Party's definition, it's not a problem for people to say that Jews have divided loyalties. In other words, the typical anti-Semitic canard that's often played out, which is that Jews owe their loyalty to another state, Israel, rather than to Britain. That's about as classic an anti-Semitic theme as you get. And yet, under the Labour Party's definition, that would be permissible.
But what's going to happen about this now? Because there are a lot of people commentators saying, look, the Labour MPs might stand up to this and vote against this and say they don't like it, and some have been openly, backing Margaret Hodge on this. She said what she said. But what's actually going to happen? What is going to
Absolutely
change?
Nothing. Absolutely nothing will happen, because absolutely nothing has happened in the 2 or 3 years since this has been going on. There have been a lot of people standing up, very decent, good Labour MPs who speak out about it and say how terrible it is. But in the end, when it comes to action, nothing happens, because nothing will happen, because the Corbynites now run the Labour Party. And the only option for people in the Labour Party who disagree with it is, of course, to fight. But when you realise that the fight's over, in my view, the only option is to say, well, I've had enough. I'm not prepared to be a representative of a party that singles out a minority and says it's okay for that minority to be attacked.
From the day that the referendum came in, the establishment and the Remainers decided they were going to use every legal way they know to make sure this never happened. And they are very, very close to pulling it off. And what we have got is the best thing on offer is basically to become a colony of the European Union, where we have no say, no vote, pay for it, and yet basically follow their rules. And at the same time, at some point, someone will say, do you know what, we might as well stay in, because at least we have a say and we don't pay any more money.
Do you believe this has been a deliberate, concerted, thought-through conspiracy, a plot by the establishment to do this?
Definitely.
And what do you think? Civil servants, politicians, who?
I'm a great believer in the cock-up theory of life, not the conspiracy theory of life. I don't believe people and events and things can be held together for conspiracies. But what I do think is that various different parts of the establishment and the Remain camp have destroyed the will of the British people. And if someone's going to say to me, well, the way to sort all this out then, if you're right, Higby, is to go and hold another referendum, all I'd say is, if the Remain camp win that time, can we have a best of 3, please? And after best of 3, can we have a best of 5? And it's EU form, isn't it? They've got previous on this. When France, Netherlands and Ireland, when they voted in referenda against what Europe wants, they make them have another referendum. And it's absolutely the same. And I feel, the coup is nearly finished. It does upset me. What I would say about Boris in his speech yesterday, the man is a busted flush. And I never wanted him to be Prime Minister. I think the chances of it now are virtually nil. 2 reasons. One, factual, which is the Tory party rules for leader mean that the MPs, and only the MPs, have the first vote. The top 2 of those go through to the country, Tories in the country, the tens of thousands or whatever it is, who actually choose between 2 people. And on that basis, Boris will never get out of the Commons because not enough MPs would support him. But what I would say is the next leader of the Tory party will not be for about a year or so.
It seems to me that so much of campus politics now is about raging against things they dislike rather than putting forward arguments for how they want the future to be different. And if you even take something like the Rose Must Fall campaign, which I think is something very similar to what we saw in Manchester, you saw students making arguments that effectively they were being harmed by this remnant of history, that walking past this statue was the equivalent of being punched in the face. And it just strikes me that a lot of this victim politics speaks to the fact that whereas in the past a lot of students thought that they could make a change in the world, that they could make history, students today increasingly think they're being beaten up by history.
Shouldn't student unions be bothered about things like rising rents, rising debt of students, rising conditions, worse conditions, the problems that students have actually getting their tutors to actually give lectures, give them the teaching that they have actually paid for and got into huge debt for? Shouldn't they be worried about those practical things rather than worrying about a 100-year-old poem?
But this is the point. It's because you have completely overemphasised the amount that this type of activism is taking place at universities, because this is some idea that there is this generation who just want to take away all our freedoms to say horrible things about people. And the right just wants to grasp onto this idea of
well, no, it's not. No, it's not. It's not the right. Many on the liberal left are very concerned about this. This idea of sort of shutting down anything that has happened before that you don't like, and potentially sort of wiping it out. It's a very new concept, and it's certainly not of the liberal left. I mean, I was brought up in a liberal left household. The idea that you would deface a poem because you didn't like what the person had said would have been utterly bizarre 20 years ago.
But I'm still interested about what you think the consequence of this could be. This is
well, no, the consequence is that people like me, and I think large numbers of people, and probably most future employers of the students who've done this, think you're all a bunch of complete lunatic snowflakes, and they don't want to touch you with a barge pole. That's what I think.
Well, it's nice because the trivialising of mental health on radio.
Oh, there you go.
We're trying to fight against.
But now, Fred, and it's exactly that response that will make you unemployable.
I mean, if
seriously
people like that want to employ me, I don't want to be employed by them. I don't
think it's going to be an issue.